Howdy, squirrels! It's reading time. Chapter 8 of The Old Curiosity Shop by Charles Dickens. Business disposed of, Mr. Swindler was inwardly reminded of its being now dinner time, and to the intent that his health might not be endangered by longer abstinence, dispatched a message to the nearest eating house, requiring an immediate supply of boiled beef and greens for two. With this demand, however, the eating house, and in parentheses, having experience of its customer, declined to comply, churlishly sending back for answer that if Mr. Swivler stood in need of beef, perhaps he would be so obliging as to come there and eat it, bringing with him, as grace before meat, the amount of a certain small account which had long been outstanding. Not at all intimidated by this rebuff, but rather sharpened in wits and appetite, Mr. Swivler forwarded the same message to another and more distant eating house, adding to it by way of rider that the gentleman was induced to send so far not only by the great fame and popularity its beef had acquired, but in consequence of the extreme toughness of the beef retailed at the obdurate cook's shop, which rendered it quite unfit not merely for gentlemanly food, but for any human consumption. The good effect of this political course was demonstrated by the speedy arrival of a small pewter pyramid, curiously constructed of platters and covers, whereof the boiled beef plates formed the base, and a foaming quart pot the apex. The structure being resolved into its component parts afforded all things requisite and necessary for a hearty meal, to which Mr. Swivler and his friend applied themselves with great keenness and enjoyment. "May the present moment," said Dick, sticking his fork into a large carbuncular potato, "be the worst of our lives. I like the plan of sending 'em with the peel on. There's a charm in drawing a potato from its native element, if I may so express it, to which the rich and powerful are strangers. Ah, man wants but little here below, nor wants that little long. How true that is, after dinner. I hope the eating-house keeper will want but little, and that he may not want that little long," returned his companion, "but I suspect you've no means of paying for this." "I shall be passing present, and I'll call," said Dick, winking his eye significantly. "The waiter's quite helpless. The goods are gone, Fred, and there's an end of it." In point of fact, it would seem that the waiter felt this wholesome truth, for when he returned for the empty plates and dishes, was informed by Mr. Swivler with dignified carelessness that he would call and settle when he should be passing presently. He displayed some perturbation of spirit, and muttered a few remarks about payment on delivery and no trust and other unpleasant subjects, but was fain to content himself with inquiring at what hour it was likely that the gentleman would call, in order that, being presently responsible for the beef, greens, and sundries, he might take to be in the way at the time. Mr. Swivler, after mentally calculating his engagements to a nicety, replied that he should look in at from 2 minutes 2 minutes before 6, and 7 minutes past, and the man disappearing with this feeble consolation, Richard Swivler took a greasy memorandum book from his pocket and made an entry therein. "Is that a reminder in case you should forget to call?" said Trent with a sneer. "Not exactly, Fred," replied the imperturbable Richard, continuing to write with a businesslike air. "I enter in this little I enter in this little book the names of the streets that I can't go down while the shops are open. Lord. The dinner today closes Long Acre. I bought a pair of boots in Great Queen last week and made that no thoroughfare too. There's only one avenue to the Strand left often now, and I shall have to stop up that tonight with a pair of gloves. Lord, can't go nowhere. Can't go anywhere. Oh, the roads are closing so fast in every direction that in a month's time, unless my aunt sends me a remittance, I shall have to go 3 or 4 miles out of town to get over the way. There's no fear of failing in the end, said Trent. Well, I hope not, returned Mr. Swiveller, but the average number of letters it takes to soften her is 6, and this time we have got as far as 8 without any effect at all. I'll write another tomorrow morning. I mean to blot it a good deal and shake some water over it out of the pepper caster to make it look penitent. I'm in such a state of mind that I hardly know what I write, blot. If you could see me at this minute shedding tears for my past misconduct, peppercaster. My hand trembles when I think, blot again. If that don't produce the effect, it's all over by this time. Mr. Swiveller had finished his entry, and he now replaced his pencil in its little sheath and closed the book in a perfectly grave and serious frame of mind. His friend discovered that it was time for him to fulfill some other engagement, and Richard Swiveller was accordingly left alone, in company with the rosy wine and his own meditations touching Miss Sophie Wackles. It's rather sudden, said Dick, shaking his head with a look of infinite wisdom, and running on, as he was accustomed to do, with scraps of verse as they were only prose in a hurry, as if they were only prose in a hurry, when the heart of a man is depressed with fears. The mist is dispelled when Miss Wackles appears. She's a very nice girl. She's like the red rose that's newly sprung in June. There's no denying that. She's also like a melody that's sweetly played in tune. It's really very sudden, not that there's any need, on account of Fred's little sister, to turn cool directly, but it's better not to go too far. If I begin to cool at all, I must begin at once. I see that. There's the chance of an action for breach. That's another. There's the chance of... No, there's not a chance of that. But it's as well to be on the safe side. This undeveloped was the possibility which Richard Swiveller sought to conceal even from himself of his not being proof against the charms of Miss Wackles, and in some unguarded moment, by linking his fortunes to hers forever, of putting it out of his own power to further their notable scheme to which he had so readily become a party. For all these reasons he decided to pick a quarrel with Miss Wackles without delay, and casting about for a pretext determined in favor of groundless jealousy. Having made up his mind on this important point, he circulated the glass from his right hand to left and back again, pretty freely to enable him to act his part with the greater discretion, and then, after making some slight improvements in his toilet, bent his steps towards the spot hallowed by the fair object of his meditations. The spot was at Chelsea, for there Miss Sophia Wackles resided with her widowed mother and 2 sisters, in conjunction with whom she maintained a very small day school for young ladies of proportionate dimensions. a circumstance which was made known to the neighborhood by an oval board over the front first-floor windows, whereupon appeared in circumambient flourishes the words Ladies' Seminary, and which was further published and proclaimed at intervals between the hours of 9:30 and 10 in the morning by a straggling and solitary young lady of tender years, standing on the scraper of the tips of her toes and making futile attempts to reach the knocker with a spelling book. The several duties of instruction in this establishment were thus discharged: English grammar, composition, geography, and the use of the dumbbells by Miss Melissa Wackles; writing of arithmetic, dancing, music, and general fascination by Miss Sophia Wackles; the art of needlework, marking, and samplery by Miss Jane Wackles; corporal punishment, fasting, and other tortures and terrors by Mrs. Wackles. Miss Melissa Wackles was the eldest daughter, Miss Sophie the next, and Miss Jane the youngest. Miss Melissa might have seen 35 summers or thereabouts, and verged on the autumnal. Miss Sophie was a fresh, good-humored, buxom girl of 20, and Miss Jane numbered scarcely 16 years. Mrs. Wackles was an excellent but rather venomous old lady of 60. To this lady's seminary, then, Richard Swiveller Hyde, Hied, with designs obnoxious to the peace of the fair Sophia, who, arrayed in virgin white, embellished by no ornament but one blushing rose, received him on his arrival, in the midst of very elegant, not to say brilliant, preparations, such as the embellishment of the room with the little flower pots, which always stood on the window-sill outside, save in windy weather when they blew into the area, the choice attire of the day scholars who were allowed to grace the festival, the unwonted curls of Miss Jane Wackles, who had kept her head during the whole of the preceding day screwed up tight in a yellow playbill, and the solemn gentility and stately bearing of the old lady and her eldest daughter, which struck Mr. Swiveller as being uncommon, but made no further impression upon him. But all these sayings and doings and thinkings being unknown to Mr. Swiveller affected him not in the least. He was debating in his mind how he could best turn jealous, and wishing that Sophie were for that occasion only far less pretty than she was, or that she were her own sister, which would have served his turn as well, when the company came, and among them the market gardener, whose name was Cheggs, Cheggs. But Mr. Cheggs came not alone or unsupported, for he prudently brought along with him his sister, Miss Cheggs, who, making straight to Miss Sophie, and taking her by both hands, and kissing her on both cheeks, hoped in an audible whisper that they had not come too early. "Too early? No," replied Miss Sophie. "Oh, my dear," rejoined Miss Cheggs in the same whisper as before, "I've been so tormented, so worried, that it's a mercy we were not here at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Alick has been in such a state of impatience to come. You'd hardly believe that he was dressed before dinner time, and has been looking at the clock and teasing me ever since. It's all your fault, you naughty thing."
Messenger video.